In the first weeks after Donald Trump's surprise election win, Democrats tried to make sense of the inexplicable, the unthinkable. How did this man become president? Was it racism? Was it sexism? A rogue FBI? An ungrateful middle class? The long-term effects of OxyContin? Well, none of those explanations answer the question adequately, and so a new culprit was found: theft. The election must have been stolen by Russian saboteurs. The country's editorial pages were in full Russian panic mode this morning. If anything, the electronic media were even more hysterical. This, for example, is how Keith Olbermann opened his internet show last night. We're not going to show you the pictures. We're just going to quote it. Buckle your seatbelts. Here it is. "We are at war with Russia, or perhaps more correctly, we have lost a war with Russia without a battle. We are no longer a sovereign nation. We are no longer a democracy. We are no longer a free people. We are the victims of a bloodless coup, so far a bloodless coup, engineered by Russia with, at best, the traitorous indifference of the Republican Party and Donald John Trump, a man who, to borrow a phrase from another December long ago, will live in infamy." Is that intense enough for you? Well, if anything, our next guest thinks that might be understated. Robert McElvain is a professor of history at Millsaps College, a columnist also at the Huffington Post, and he's been writing a lot about Russia in recent days, and he joins us now. Professor, thanks for coming on.
Glad to be with you.
I want to quote something you wrote just a couple days ago that I read in the Huffington Post. You say, and I'm quoting, "There is substantial evidence that Russia stole the election for Donald Trump." What is that evidence that they stole the election?
Well, first of all, I do not go beyond Keith Olbermann. In fact, a lot of that is certainly hyperbole. But when people say that whatever Russia did clearly didn't affect the election, that's ridiculous. We hardly ever hear mentioned in the media that Hillary Clinton won by 2.8 million votes in the real vote. The three states that put Trump over the top in the Electoral College was by a total of a little over 80,000 votes. And if anyone thinks that what the Russians were doing in terms of the emails that were released through WikiLeaks intended to damage Hillary, and they obviously did to a great extent, were not enough to get 80,000 votes moved in the direction of Trump away from Hillary, I don't know what they're thinking. Obviously,
okay, well, but hold on. I want to get back to what you wrote. You wrote something very specific. I'm going to read it to you again in case you don't remember writing it. "There is substantial evidence that Russia stole the election for Donald Trump." I'm not contesting it was a close election. I'm, of course, familiar with the numbers. How did Russia steal the election? Please be precise.
The way I just said, by doing things that were intended to help him and to hurt Hillary Clinton. I don't think initially that was what the Russians were expecting to happen. They thought, like almost everyone else, including Trump himself, that Hillary would win the election. They were trying to damage her, make it closer, make her weaker. But as it got closer to the end, they saw the possibility of him winning.
But hold on, I don't want to interrupt you, and I don't want to talk over each other, but you're saying, how would you know what the Russians think? Do you have special access to the thinking of Vladimir Putin? How would you know that? And again, for the third time, how did they steal the election? You said they stole the election, and I'm open-minded, but I want to know how they did that specifically.
Well, I think I've just told you twice, and I know you like to argue, but what I'm trying to get at here is the fact that the Russians are going to have enormous influence in a Trump administration, and this is not something that should only bother Democrats or liberals. It's an American issue. It's a patriotic issue.
Okay, but hold on. I'm sorry. You wrote. You're a college professor. You have a real job. You wrote on one of the biggest websites in the world, the Huffington Post, that they stole the election. Now I'm quoting: "The survival of the American Republic is at stake. We have only 10 days to save the Republic from a hostile takeover by billionaire oligarchs and their Russian backers." I want to know how this happened. How specifically did they influence the election? By releasing these emails? Do you have evidence that these emails swayed the election results? If so, what is that evidence? I mean, you made all these claims.
Are you seriously suggesting that the emails did not have an influence on the election? I mean, everyone knows that.
Well, how does everyone? I mean, everyone. Let's say
Trump would say they didn't. He's the one who kept telling the Russians to go ahead and release them.
Come on. You're making specific claims. You say they stole the election, and I'm not misquoting you. You wrote that like 3 days ago. And I'm asking you how, and you won't answer, and you're instead saying it was a very close election.
I have answered it repeatedly. What I would like to, instead of getting into an argument over that, would like to ask why everyone in the country is not seriously upset, not only about the Russian intervention in the election, but the fact that the National Security Advisor is very close to Putin, the incoming Secretary of State is very close to Putin.
Look,
Mr. Trump
we're going to be
himself
debating that for the rest of the show.
Continued to talk about Putin in the most glowing terms. This is crazy. I mean,
then let me ask you.
Can't imagine if this was on the other in the other direction.
If it was on the other side,
what people like you would be saying. What you'd be saying if Hillary Clinton had been helped by the Russians and
I don't want to keep talking over you.
Russian-favorable people into the government.
I have to say, I would ask the exact same question, which is, if you're going to claim that a foreign government influenced the outcome of elections in this country, be very specific about how they did it. Do you think they altered the count from the voting machines? Do you think a specific piece of propaganda? Okay. Then
there is no evidence of that.
Okay, then tell me your evidence.
I told you repeatedly what they did. What we know they did was to put out the emails.
Please just hear my question.
And incidentally, if you let me talk for just a moment, if you let me talk for just a moment, it's interesting that Mr. Trump focused in on the claim that was in one of the news stories over the weekend that the RNC was also hacked and insisted that wasn't true. Well, let's think about why he would want to insist that. Because if, in fact, the RNC was hacked and they didn't put anything out.
I have you on to offer evidence to support something that you wrote, and I'm giving you airtime in front of a lot of people.
And I have offered you the evidence of that. What I would like to do is talk about why you and every other American should be concerned about an American government beholden to Vladimir Putin.
I'm concerned enough to have you on, and you are literally the last guest I'm going to ask this of, because I've asked it for the last 5 days, not one person has answered. Name one email or one piece of information that was false that got into the media bloodstream in America that you think was sufficient to influence the election for Donald Trump. Just name one.
Did I say that they were false? No, I didn't say they were false.
Then name a real one and show some evidence that it influenced voter behavior.
For the express purpose of helping Trump.
But name one piece of information from WikiLeaks that you can show influenced voter behavior on a scale sufficient to pull the election for Trump. You can't.
Remember, we just talked about a moment ago a scale sufficient. If you look at the total vote, the number of votes that gave Trump a lead in the electoral college,
I'm going to stop you there. You were saying irresponsible things that are misleading people, and I think it's wrong.
The entire electorate.
Robert, I'm cutting you off because I gave you a chance, and you refused to be real with me, and I'm sorry about that. Thanks for joining us.